Hello and welcome to Huge History. My name's Jordan and this is Huge History A to Z. Today we are looking at the letter A, and for this topic today we are looking at Athens, the city-state, the famous Greek city, the famous civilization. So Athens is a very famous place in history, especially for Westerners, and it conjures up an image of democracy, of idealism, of thinking and learning and science in an age that was not really dominated by those things. Athens is such a fantastic example of how long ago history spans and how things can change throughout history, but at the same time stay the same. So, let's talk about Athens. How did Athens begin? What is the history of Athens? Athens started off as a small settlement in the region of Attica in Greece. It's still there today, it hasn't moved. Attica is a very beautiful place in Greece, but it has rather poor soil. It's good for growing olives, but not very good at growing food, such as wheat. So the early Athenians learnt quite quickly that to survive and to grow, they would have to trade. And this meant that the Athenians became excellent sailors and excellent traders, excellent diplomats, because they were often engaging with other cultures throughout the Aegean, other civilizations, because they needed to trade to survive. So Athens at the time, in about 750 BC is when we first begin to see Athens as a proper city. And through this time, Athens begins trading, and we begin to see other city-states begin to grow, and lots of different forms of government appear. In Athens, Athens is ruled by what is known as an aristocracy, which is where the rich, land-owning nobles control the government. And the only way you can get into government, the only way, is by blood, to be born into it. So this created a large amount of social dissatisfaction, as you can imagine, because the people of Athens felt they had no control over their destiny. This changed in 621 BCE, when a man named Draco, Athens' first great lawmaker, came up with a series of laws that helped limit the power of the aristocracy and helped increase the power of the lower classes. Now, these laws were incredibly harsh, and the result for most of these was death, but the laws stated that there would be an end of feudalism and a changing of the system of government and how it worked. This didn't really work for many people. For the aristocracy, it didn't work because it limited their power too much, and because breaking the law often resulted in death. So, in 549 BCE, another great lawmaker, a guy named Solon, came in and he modified Draco's laws. He changed them. And these laws were way more workable. Because, most importantly, of the things that they did, they changed things for the better. So, first of all, one of the first changes that he did was getting rid of the ability to sell people into slavery because of how far they fall into debt. This was a large problem in Athens at the time. It also broke the idea of feudalism, that peasants and workers were tied to the land and to their owner. It really got rid of the whole idea of feudalism. But most importantly, it changed the requisite of government. It changed the requisite of government from being blood, from being the nobles being born into power, into anyone who was rich enough, a certain amount of wealth to be able to get into government. This doesn't seem like much of a change, especially for the people, but it was a massive change, because now anyone, and I say anyone because, people are in different situations, but anyone can take Athens in a different direction. It's really massively limited the power of the aristocracy, because people they didn't want were able to get into government, especially rich merchants. Remember, Athens was a trading civilization. So Athens began changing into a different direction, and the power of the aristocracy was limited so much that in 560 BCE, a man named Piestrausus, very difficult word to say, came to power. He seized power from the aristocracy and he placed himself as total ruler. He was a tyrant, a dictator. He was a benevolent dictator though, and he was really quite well loved by the people. He even kept Solon's commodified laws, to work for him, but slightly changed. He ruled for quite a long time, and Athens entered a golden age under his rule and under the future rules of people. Lots of famous people were born during Priastrausus's rule and the following rules. Plato and Aristotle would both teach and work in Athens. Socrates would stand in the Athenian marketplace and teach the people about philosophy. Hippocrates, the modern father of medicine. Well, the father of medicine. I mean, this guy came up with the idea of the human body and how it worked and all the things along those lines. He was born and practiced in Athens. So what happened was Priastrausus died and he gave power to his son, Hippas. Hippas was far crueler, and in 510 BCE he was overthrown by the people in the Athenian revolt. And to find a new system of government that worked for the Athenian people, a man named Cleisthenes was chosen. Cleisthenes is really the father of democracy when you think about it, the way he set all these laws out. Cleisthenes instituted a system in which is slightly different and different wording, but is very similar to the system we have today. So Cleisthenes was a great lawmaker, and he came up with this idea of breaking down Athens into 139 voting districts. That increased as population decreased, but this meant that the people were able to elect their representatives. So the people voted, they would choose one person who would go forward into the council, and out of all of these people, they were able to be chosen to join the 50-person member council that ran Athens, the actual proper government. So the people elected their representatives, their members of parliament, if you will, and these members of parliament would then go to Congress or the parliament or the Senate in the Athenian terms. And this boomed a golden age for Athens, as I explained before. So Athens became very powerful, and as did many other Greek city-states. But there was a change. So in about the 500 and 499, Athens and the massive Achaemenid Persian Empire met. The Achaemenid Persian Empire was the biggest empire in history at the time and had reached Greece because it had been expanding west. It had recently taken land in Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, Asia Minor, as it was called to Westerners. And this brought them into direct conflict because there was, maybe not a large, but there was a significant Greek population along the coast of Asia Minor, and these were now ruled by Greeks. So the Greeks were terrified of the Persians coming west and they would take their land. So Athens and other Greek city-states began inciting revolts in the Greek populations in Persia. This, of course, pissed off the Achaemenids, Persians. So Athens and Persia went to war. Athens had her Greek city-state allies, and Persia had its massive army. And there were huge battles, huge wars. And this culminated into the Battle of Marathon, in which Athens won, and the Persians were pushed out of Greece, until they returned a decade later, in 480 BCE, under a new emperor, with a bigger army and a bigger navy, and they declared war on Greece again. And this time they were going to take all of Greece out. They were going to crush Athens, their enemy. Greek city-states began to surrender. People thought, well, how can we fight this giant army? Except for Athens and Sparta, one of the two leading states in Greece at the time, decided to fight, and this joined other city-states. And a huge battle before, and this directly led to the Battle of Thermopylae, where the Spartans fought a massively overwhelming force of Persians. So, what happened was the Persians and the Spartans fought, the Spartans lost, and the Persians were able to quickly rush to undefended Athens, and they destroyed the city. They sacked it. Luckily, the population had been evacuated, and the Athenian fleet had been protected. And about a year later, at the Battle of Salamis, the Persians were defeated on the sea by the Athenian navy, and this began what we know as the pushback of the Persians, the Greek counterattack, and until about 478 BCE, the Persians were all but pushed out of Greece. Now, the Persian threat scared a lot of Greek city-states, so Athens came up with the idea of forming the Delian League, in which Athens at the head and other Greek city-states would combine their fleets into a massive common unified fleet, which they could all use to fight against the Persians if need be. This worked out really well, especially for the first couple of years where this new common fleet was able to defeat the Persian fleets. But things began to change. Athens began to treat the League as its own personal empire, and this empire, the Athenian Empire, would you will, required money from the city-states instead of ships, taxes or a tribute instead of the ships that it was used for the fleet. And the fleet was actually given unto direct command under Athens, under their generals. This was not good, especially for other Greek city-states like Sparta, who was Athens' rival. Sparta saw this, and became quite worried. And in 431 BCE, the Peloponnesian War happened, which was a battle between Athens and her Greek allies and Sparta and their Greek allies because of how tensions had been risen against each other. The fighting went for about 30 years. It was really heavy fighting. Lots of people died. Sparta eventually emerged victorious on land and on sea. This is because Sparta was a military society, while Athens, like I said before, was trading and prestige and learning. While they had a fantastic army and had beat the Persians before, it was very difficult to stand up against Sparta. Athens' economy was wiped out by 13 years of fighting. Athens itself wasn't destroyed because Athens had such a prestigious placement in Greek society. Spartans did not want to destroy it. But Athens fell below Sparta, and Sparta took the place as leading city-state. Athens was really weak. All of Greece actually was really weak. The war had wiped out armies. Lots of people had died. Economies were destroyed. And this meant that in 338 BCE, King Philip II, who was ruler of the Macedonians, Alexander the Great's father, conquered Athens. Now, this began a trend of Mediterranean and big empires taking control of Athens, and Athens rarely getting to decide her own fate. There was a small period after the Macedonians, before the Romans, where Athens was independent again, but it didn't last long. And when the Romans conquered Athens, golden age ended, and a new one started. And that's how history goes. Civilizations rise and fall. Rome became very powerful. But it is important to remember that while Athens' golden age has ended, there is always that idea, isn't there? That idea about how Athens is a city and a civilization of learning, of intellectual haven from a brutal world, of science, of trade, of freedom most importantly, of democracy. And even though it was so long ago, over 2,000 years ago, we still to this day, at least I do, I still have an image of Athens as a city of freedom, of justice. It stays with you, even though it's a time so long past, it's not a time forgotten. And I think really that's what it is about Athens, isn't it? It's not what they did at the time, it's the legacy that was left. Thank you for watching. My name's been Jordan. This has been Huge History A to Z. Athens. It has been fantastic learning about. It's been fantastic talking to you guys. Have a great day.